as we get started here, we are doing something, Charlie, for the first time, and that is go live with a real audience.
Yes, a totally volunteer audience that is not captive in any way, shape, or form.
Because captive would mean that they are required by their professor to be here.
As if they were compelled.
Yes, and I'm not going to say what this is in place of. Please don't say that because I might get myself in trouble. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. This is a voluntary thing. Everybody, shake your heads for the crowd. There we go.
Do it.
100% voluntary. Great. And you're here because, as you all know,
I didn't see you shake your head.
We don't just have
evidence. All right.
Leave poor Jake alone. This isn't just us doing an interview. This is also meeting the person that we are using for our class, her book called Present Beyond Measure. And as I was reading it, first of all, we have a mutual friend, Zach Gemignani. He brought me onto the book. And I just noticed myself nodding over and over again because it's exactly the way I feel. I wish I could put things in writing like I can talk, because I can obviously talk. It's just the writing part sometimes gets to me. And so with that, we're using that as our basis. Really, and Leah, just to set things up today, we're just getting into the book. So but the second half is when we do our project. And so we're leading into this. So you're here to inspire them for that second half of the semester. And everybody, let's welcome Lea Pica.
Thank you. Hi.
Leah, thank you again. And Charlie and I are going to both interject, but he knows that this is a true pleasure for me to have you on here today. And as we get started, I would like you just to tell us a little bit about you and your, I'll say, data journey.
Well, the day I was born, it was stormy.
There you go.
So storytelling and performance has been in my life since before I can remember anything. I started dance when I was 3. I started singing on stage when I was 8, dancing ballet, everything. So stories at movies, books, I always was so captivated by a well-told story, and I have a very vivid imagination, so I loved having my emotions triggered and feeling moved and transformed and inspired and ignited, all these drama words. And, when I graduated college, I realized I didn't really have the fortitude to make a musical theater career work and maybe make no money. I kind of wanted to have a normal lifestyle, so I went into marketing. I kind of fell into marketing and digital analytics kind of almost out of the gate. But it was a far cry from performance until I noticed that we were asked to go into business meetings with very intimidating looking people named stakeholders and decision makers and managers and bosses. And they had a sort of like stern, focused, intensity to them. And they were busy and easily distracted. And we would go in and we would present information. And I took one PowerPoint class in college. I learned all of the animations and like laser beaming in letters one at a time and the sound effects and like checkerboard transitions. I was like a pro. I was a pro at PowerPoint at this point. So I did all of that, and I could not figure out why people were distracted and falling asleep and completely not interested or asking me challenging questions. This is kind of what could be waiting for you in the business world, just so you know.
Because it doesn't happen to professors in a class at all. Everybody is engaged the whole time.
I'm sure you have their rapt attention, and they're not at all doom scrolling. Right.
That's right. For sure.
Right now.
This is, well, just to interject real quick, this is one of the most important things, not even from a stakeholder perspective, but just to get your way in business, you've got to be able to data storytell or tell stories with data.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
It's one of the hottest skill sets that is being looked for in the skill set if you looked on LinkedIn. So I was like, what the heck is going on here? Like, why does no one, they keep telling me to come present, but no one seems to care about what I have to say. And it doesn't do anything. No one does anything about it. And it was really frustrating. And then I was invited to deliver a sort of capstone presentation at my MBA graduation. And I didn't want the same thing to happen. And I stumbled upon a book called Presentation Zen by a man named Gar Reynolds. The book changed my life. He's now a friend of mine, which is so cool. And but that book turned everything I thought I knew about PowerPoint and slides and design on its head. And I realized, oh my God, this is what we're all getting wrong. We're all doing this completely wrong. So I started changing everything about the way I was presenting data, and I started incorporating some of the storytelling mechanics and elements of drama and suspense and anticipation that I love about Hollywood and cinema into the conference room, and people started staying awake and leaning forward and nodding their heads and asking questions that showed that they were understanding what was happening, but they were really engaged. And then people started taking action on information. They started doing things after the meeting. And I was drunk with power, and I had so much fun with it that people started coming to me for help. Like big shots at my company were coming to me to consult for their executive board meeting presentations. And then one day I was talking to a vendor and I've wanted for years to present at their summit. It was my big, hairy dream, but I didn't know what I would talk about. And then I pitched this topic, present about presenting, and they said yes, and I did it. And it was one of their top 3 rated keynotes of all time in the history of their client summits, and I had never presented at a conference before. So what that told me, and I don't think it was that great. It just told me that the message landed like an anvil for people, that they knew what it was like to sit in really boring presentations and feel like, well, that's an hour I'm never going to get back in my life. And instead, they wanted to know how to do things differently, and they wanted to experience as an audience member differently. And it really took off from there. And 10 years later, I made a baby.
Oh, and there it is.
It's been, you don't even know, it's been a dream of mine to help college students learn this information before they spend 10 years spinning their wheels, making the same mistakes that I did. So this book was the antidote to all the mistakes I've ever made. And I'm just so, like, this is the moment right here. I'm so proud of you guys.
Well, we were getting our friend to take some pictures for us, and so we'll make sure that we let you know. And this book has not been out long. It's we're probably the first group, because literally, when was the published date?
September 26th.
September 26th. So you all are definitely the first ones that are using it for that. And I've got, I want to talk about some of the different aspects. I've got one of our students that's going to ask some questions about storytelling. But I'll be nice, Charlie, and I'll let you ask any questions at this point before I start diving into some of the other areas.
Okay.
Not yet? Oh, he's not ready yet.
Impromptu questions?
Well, yes. I'll go ahead.
No, I've got you seem to be into telling stories. So what's a good example for the folks here of a hard lesson that you learned? And how what you did to make it better?
Like a story go wrong kind of thing, or just?
We inevitably learn some things the hard way, and so not everybody
I have the perfect.
We'll go for it.
I have the perfect one because I wanted to tell this story anyway. But first, I wanted to check: have you guys reviewed the narrative arc chapter? Have you gone through and learned the steps of the narrative?
They just started it.
Yeah, no, we're through about chapter 7, and that's all we've required at this point.
Okay, so does anyone remember, does it sound familiar, the narrative arc with the 5 steps that take you up in the... Okay, great. All right, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to play a game. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to answer Charlie's question, And I'm going to tell you a story with a hard lesson learned, but I'd love for people to try to pick out the different stages of the narrative arc in the story. How does that work? Does that sound?
It sounds
all right.
Sounds
fun.
Cool.
They're thinking, did you just say I have to do math?
That's on page 35 and 36 if you have.
Yeah. So it might be useful to actually pick out the arc. By the way, if no one gets it, this isn't being graded. No one can get this wrong. This is an experiment.
All right. We've got, it looks like we have enough books out so that you all can at least see it. And we have people that actually bought the real book, not just the Kindle version. Look at that. The real book.
Oh, hello.
You know, yes. I bought the Kindle version because I'm like, I don't ever want paper. Then I'm like, you know, some of those, you just got to feel when it's figures and that stuff. All right, go ahead.
Yeah.
We're ready to play that game.
So this is the story of why I could not join last time as scheduled.
Why you couldn't join last time.
All right. So about 4 weeks ago, I woke up and I was so excited for the last session I had that day, which was guest starring in my friend's class, college class. So I was excited. But I had a few things I had to take care of that day. One of them included my semi-annual dentist checkup. So I went to the dentist and all was well. But I happened to mention that the last time that I was there, I was supposed to have 2 fillings, or they were supposed to check to see if I needed them, and they never called me back. So they went away, they scurried away, and then they came back and moved me to a different room, and they said, okay, here we go, and immediately started injecting my face with anesthetic and numbing agents and things, and I kind of didn't realize what was happening until it was happening, and I thought, okay, I have something tonight, so what happens? What happens now? And as I'm asking, my face starts going like this. I'm like, what happens? Does anything happen to my face?
Oh, geez.
And the dentist is like, don't worry, your face is just going to look a little bit different for about an hour. You'll be fine. So 22 minutes of screeching intensity later, I go home and I am prepared to allow my face, which is literally sagging like it was like a terrible makeup job for a horror movie. It was horrible. And after that, I waited, and an hour passed, and then another hour and a half passed, and we were closing in to about 3 hours to the talk, and my face had not changed one bit. And now I was starting to get very concerned. So I emailed the professor and let him know that, okay, this is what's happening. I'm hoping it'll be fine by the time I log on. Another 2 hours passed, no change. And then finally, I had to send the note that I wasn't able to do it. And when I sent the note, literally my face was completely frozen on one side. Oh. And I was so devastated. I was so sad. And I emailed and I waited for the answer. And I thought, oh God, am I fired? Did I lose my chance? Is he going to be so upset? Am I going to lose my career? And then he emailed me back saying, don't worry about it. I totally understand, because he's such a cool guy. We'll reschedule. And I felt a huge wave of relief. And then a little bit later, I got another email saying, you guys had an amazing chat that night that was totally unscripted and flowy, and that you had,
that's for sure.
And you had a blast. And I felt this additional wave of relief that it actually turned out for the best, and we rescheduled, and now here we are together, and my face is not on the floor. The end.
The end. Great job. Yeah. Now, a little bit of other stuff. You were not only emailing, you were texting frantically as well.
I did. I used every channel.
And making sure that I saw it. And when I got in the classroom, I think was when I first realized that you weren't going to be able to be there. And I'm looking at what my next week's agenda was, and it was data. And to do like things in data, you know, you have to have data. And I wasn't ready for that yet. So I'm like, okay. And I was at a point where I had just done these, went through this exercise with a branding and marketing guy, and he goes, what do you want to be? And I'm like, I just want to be authentic. And I walked in and I just tried to be myself. And Charlie's laughing.
You
I authenticated like crazy. But here was the best part. They played along, and we just had a 2-hour conversation. And it was by far, it would have been better if you were there, but it was the best class I have ever been part of. I don't know if they can say that, but for me,
no pressure. No pressure.
It was, and you don't have to say that, but for me, because, you know, it's rare when, you know, it's good to have a textbook and stuff, but when you can actually get to what is real help, right? And you know that it's so hard teaching these type of skills more than anything else. And so how do you convey that? How do you talk about audience if you don't talk about yourself? And that's really what we did. It was a great experience. And so we're better today because now we're at this beautiful place. And I even brought Charlie along, and they've been gracious enough to allow me to pivot and do different things in this class. So
But what was the hard lesson, though?
We got to go to the narrative, right? And he's been reading up on it. Okay, Charlie, now
can someone pick out what the lesson?
What is the hard lesson?
Yeah.
Don't go to the dentist the day that
not
you're
the
going to do a
steps.
speaking.
Yes,
that's what I'm picking
the
up.
Hard lesson.
When they pull the needles out, that's the time to say like, whoa. Let's talk about this.
Yes.
That feels like the lesson learned.
No, I'm pretty sure I'll never be getting dental work or any cleaning whatsoever on the day I have a speaking gig. That's pretty much.
Gotcha. So we're talking next week, I think. And should I cancel my root canal for that morning?
I would. It is a video show, so I would.
Yeah. That's probably a good idea for sure. All right. Anybody else want to add something to that? And I can even bring a mic to you if you'd like.
Yeah, could anyone pick out the steps?
I see you looking shiny. I see you looking at the book. So any spots?
Man, you guys are you can't go anywhere. Like, he can just keep on poking you guys and messing with you guys. And, like, if you leave, you're in trouble, right? No.
Well,
it is Belmont, though. Belmont might care.
Care about what?
Students getting up and walking out of class.
Well, they would never do that. These are the good kind.
I don't know. Like, I'm not used to hanging out with students, and so like
I can tell.
You poke a room full of adults like this, and they're gonna get out of here.
Oh well, I think some of the things I want to. Were there times where you noticed like an anticipation where you could see the build up and you could know that the resolution was about ready to come? Think about that. She took going to the dentist and created a story out of that. First of all, let's give her a hand for that, right?
I am an actor first. No, I'm kidding.
So if you can take something like going to the dentist and turning it into a story, how do we then do that with things like data? And I think, well, I'll tell you what, Zach, I'm going to make you come up here and you can be part of our conversation. You want to do that?
Oh.
Come on up, Zach. Zach, I'm about ready to get into the storytelling part. Here we go. And go ahead and say hi, Zach.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh.
All right. So, Zach, I'm going to use you as our example because one of the things I always like to start at the beginning, and I think the hardest thing to do, whether it's data or you're going to try to tell a story with data, is start. How do you start the process? You know you got to do something, and to help Zach, and then I'll let you take it from there. But Leah, what would be some tidbits on getting started?
Yeah. So you asked about how I took going to the dentist and created a story. So really, the story is about picking out what happened, picking out the events, and making sure you're sequencing them in the right order, and that there's an element of build-up, as you said, anticipation. But it's really about, kind of in the book, what happened. That's your starting point. So, Zach, do you have an example of something that happened in the data?
In the data, or just in, you can just use real
Or
life,
in your life.
if you want to go there. There you go.
Yeah.
Data. You can only use data.
Just only data.
Yeah, yeah.
Only data, okay.
Anything that has happened in real life. I think I don't understand the question.
Think about our Airbnb example.
Yeah.
And you are going to buy an Airbnb here in the Nashville area. What would be a question that you would have if you were going to do that?
The location, the price.
Okay.
Just
So if I'm the person that you have hired to analyze that data and help you successfully buy the right Airbnb, which, by the way, is down my street, because everybody has an Airbnb on my street, I swear. What would be some of those starting points, Leah?
So I want to make sure I understand the context of
Sure.
what you're trying to do first. So are you saying that you, Charlie, are someone like you're looking to buy an Airbnb and he has to analyze the data to give me kind of the purpose?
Yeah, let's
'Cause
do
remember
it that
that's
way.
what we start with.
So
right?
I'm the rich guy that is wanting to buy a bunch of
Hang on.
houses.
What are we trying to learn here?
How to start a data story.
So how to start a data?
Yes.
To start a data story, do you just not start with a story, and then attach data to it? I mean, this is assuming that we've already got
That's a great question, right? And so
Sure.
of like starting point.
So Zach
Yeah.
has all of the Airbnb data in Nashville.
Okay.
100% of it. Everyone that's been rented out. Every day he has reviews, and he's selling this nice little service, or maybe he's my friend that just happened to have a lot of data. And now he's going to help me decide the district that I should buy. There's 32 districts within Nashville. And so, does that sound good? So you're going to be that guy. You're going to help me out. Where would
Okay.
you start, Zach, right?
So this is a little... Oh, I'm sorry. Was that for him?
No,
Go for it.
I don't know who it's for.
Now we're looking at you.
Now
When we go on a podcast, I'm just
Yeah.
kidding. I'm going to give you a hard time. Go ahead.
So think about it like this: frame the reference of the story around like what's an ideal experience when you go to an Airbnb. So think about it like that, and like so when you go to an Airbnb, what do you like to see? Like, do you like long ass lists? Oh, my bad. Do you
That's
like
okay.
long lists of chores that you got to do before you leave? Like, do you like doing all the laundry for the place and then getting charged $300 for the cleaning fee? Like, just like, what do you like? What do you don't like? What do you not like?
Yeah.
And then try to think about how to start a story off of that. Or maybe it's like, I'm coming to town and I've got to find the right district based off of what interests I've got or something like that. So what are you into?
Just make sure it's clean overall.
Okay. So that would mean like you look at ratings.
Ratings.
Okay. And so have you ever been to a place that has alcohol ready for you? Do you drink?
Hey, come on now.
Probably getting ahead of
These
myself.
are graduate students, so
So
they should be.
Yes.
They should. Well, we're a Christian school, please.
there are Catholics in there.
There you go.
All right,
Wine.
help Leah, help Zach
Yeah.
out. He's not supposed to be creating the story. He's going to get the help from our author here. Come on now.
So let me take a step back, because it's the general context that I talk about presenting data in the book is, let's say Airbnb is the client of a digital marketing agency, and Zach is their client, is their agency analyst, and Airbnb wants to know how well they are doing in a particular market. And then you'd present results that kind of around that. But in your specific scenario, what I would do, kind of hinging off of what Charlie's talking about, tell two stories. Tell a story of an Airbnb that sucked. like your worst experience, and then put the things that happened. So I booked exposition. So we booked this Airbnb in Poughkeepsie, I don't know. And right away, as soon as I saw it, I knew something wasn't right. Blah, rising action, right? We opened the door and there were dead bugs everywhere. I'm being dramatic, but dead bugs and things had not been cleaned. And that's the action rising. But the worst of all was there was an octopus in our tub. I don't know. Silly. There was an octopus waiting in our tub. How could it get worse than this? And that's the climax. And then, but then, that was the worst. But, I knew I would never do that again. So the next time we booked Airbnb, I made sure to message the host and get pictures and da-da-da-da-da. And like, that's the falling action. Now you are like overcoming the climax by putting in your own solution. And then I had the most fabulous time in my next time because I felt informed and I did my homework and the blah, blah, blah. And then I had a fabulous time at that Airbnb.
I've got a question though.
Oh, okay.
Does one octopus in the tub make you ask every other Airbnb if they happen to have an octopus in the tub, or is it just a one-off?
I mean, it is prudent at that point. Yeah, no, but the closing and the resolution becomes what you did to overcome the hardship, the conflict that you encountered, and then this is the solution, and then that goes into, so my friend, what I recommend is make sure to check these reviews, make sure to talk to the owner in advance, like that's what you're doing to present the plan of action, but you've couched it in a story that is interesting and funny and engaging, but really kind of like takes people on the ick factor of the part of the story that's hard, and then they can feel the relief with you as you implemented the resolution. Does that make sense?
So go ahead with any questions. You have a theme, and so you're. I kind of derailed you a little bit by throwing you into a story. So, yeah. Well, hey, this is midterm time. So that was well done. Now I would also think I go into then how does the data then reinforce that, and you can see that ratings. When it comes to ratings, accuracy is by far the most important component to that. Mm-hmm. And if they would have just told us there was an octopus in the tub, then I wouldn't be surprised by that.
A lot of people would just be like, yeah, I'm doing that.
Well,
is it live?
Let's not keep going on the octopus here. But I love that as the analogy.
I'm having octopus regret.
That's right. Go ahead, Zach.
I think the biggest thing that stuck out to me for your chapter 5, which I read and just wanted to ask a question about, was you mentioned Ryan Levesque with the ask method, and he stated that people buy with emotions and then justify with logic. So I feel like that could be like a positive and then a negative, since people could use that just against one another. So I don't know, I wanted you to touch on that a bit more, and just what you just cover that statement.
Great question.
Yeah, it is. When you get to the chapter on ethical data communication, it will come a little bit clearer. So you don't want to start with a story because what happened in the data should actually paint the picture of the story. If you're creating a story before the data, you're not telling the truth of the data necessarily. So you always want to tell the truth of the data, but you don't want to make it a boring truth. You want to bring elements of taking your audience on a journey with it. So if you are taking what you're seeing in the data, like Airbnb wants to know what's going wrong with this particular region of their sales, something is happening. So in the data, when you do the analysis, you find that the mobile site, the mobile app is glitching out. This is simple, right? Very simple, basic example. But the mobile app is glitching out for that region for some reason. Something with those states listings are going awry. and they find this in the data. They haven't made up the story around it. They found that this was the reason. Well, they could go in and go, your app is glitchy. Like, that's not an actual story because they might not understand the real impetus for solving for it. It might be expensive to fix. They might be like, oh, okay, who cares? But when you couch it in a story, which would be like, you asked us to look at why blah, 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 this is happening. We took a number of different routes. We checked over here and everything was fine. We checked the desktop and everything was fine. But then we decided to check on the mobile version of this region. And we found that one of the states is completely glitching out. Dun, dun, dun. Like, that's how, that's how you're bringing that in. You are triggering their emotions intentionally so that they are engaged and actively wanting to do something about it. They're like, what they're wanting to know, how do I solve this? Oh no, this is terrible, right? But you aren't triggering emotions unethically. You aren't telling any truth. You aren't telling any false information. You're not manipulating the data. You understand? And a lot of times people confuse storytelling and suspense and drama for manipulation. And it's not. It's just communicating the information in a way that leverages how humans interact emotionally with things and are inspired to take action, which is the point of presenting the data in the first place.
Yeah, because the data allows you to build trust on the first pass through in a way that, like, you might take some convincing otherwise, and it gives whoever you're telling the tools to run that up the flagpole too, so then they can accurately retell your story from the data's perspective instead of it just being like, oh, they said this thing. And so the first person you talk to, you may can get them good and worked up in a frenzy, but then they go tell their boss or the buying manager or whomever, and they're like, I don't care. And so you're also establishing the ability for them to hand that off as well.
Yeah, and we've talked about like anecdotal stories, and that's more to make it familiar to the person versus, hitting the emotional component. And
I mean, you do want to hit the emotional component.
Well, sure, but it's to get to think logically. And a lot of times it's, we did some presentations in one of my other classes last night, and I saw a lot of data, but I didn't, they were talking about some of the lower income levels, and I'm like, I didn't feel anything but numbers. And I wanted to feel that they're human. There's people behind the data. And I think we a lot of times make different decisions if we understand there's humans there. There's a community there, not just numbers. Now, some people don't want that because they want to do things, from a profitable perspective. But it is amazing when you can bring out the human component. And a lot of times, I think I get that streamlined throughout all of the book. And where the ethical one is what we're going to hit right before the week before you're going to do your presentations. I want that to be very clear. And it's right at the end of the book on that. Thank you, Zach, for helping us out. I know we wish we had more time, but we want to get to others. But we are talking about ethical considerations. Hold on.
And could I add something really quickly?
Of course.
What I wanted to add is that kind of what you're saying, Charlie, like when it lands as just numbers, it's kind of lands with a thud. But I reference the book Made to Stick in my book with Chip and Dan Heath. And the study that he does with his own college students shows the same results every year. Whenever his students present information, the same statistics in a story versus just the statistics, the recall of that information vastly jumps if it is presented as part of the story.
Yeah, I think that's what caught your attention, Charlie. You were talking about how it's like 6 times or something that people will remember when they can see it versus just hearing or when they can visualize it, basically.
I'm not sure what you're talking about. But.
That's okay. That's all right. Well, you were mentioning a stat to me earlier.
I was talking about the learning thing.
Yeah.
The doing it.
Oh, the doing part. That's right. That too.
Oh, I see.
Of,
okay.
Stuff.
Yeah.
Like
The cone of learning.
It makes me wonder why we even bother with just me telling people what they need to learn. Just make them do it from the start.
Well, I get you there. I want to stick a little bit on the ethical considerations, and I've brought Allie Crocker up here to talk to us about that. Let's give her a round of applause. Welcome. All right. Allie, let's make sure that's working. And
hey, Leah, can you hear me all right?
You sound great.
Oh, that's great.
I just want to say on behalf of the class, I think it's awesome that you're willing to do this with us. This is such an incredible opportunity to learn directly from the author of the book that we're studying. So I think I speak on behalf of everybody when I say we're grateful for the opportunity to learn from you and to chat with you. Nice. I'm really interested in some ethical considerations when you're forming these data stories, when you're gathering the data. I guess a wonderful place to start would be, and of course it's different by on every basis, but how typically do you begin collecting the data first? How does that process start?
So most of the time when I was working, either we had a standing, what's called a readout, where we would just check on the standard numbers that we were monitoring or optimizing for, or we would get asked a specific question, like, hey, we have this new project coming, we'd like to understand directionally which way we should go, or we'd be kind of bopping around the data and actually see something off, like see some major change in one of our conversion rates, or what we're spending on advertising, things like that. So the easiest is if we just catch it in the data and we decide to dig deeper. That's kind of the case study that kicked off my presentation arc at my company when I noticed something wrong with our website site search function and collected a lot of information that stuff was going not well with that. But when you have more of a standing readout, and I think, the book offers some really good starting point questions for that, the eight or 10 questions that to kick off the presentation, to look at the kinds of decisions, if it's for a meeting, to look at the kinds of decisions that are being made, what the objective of the meeting is to arrive at a specific course of action, and that is a starting point. But then that magic question, like, what would you like to ask the data if it were a real live person? If you were catching up at a bar and you're like, yeah, I've been doing this thing and I really want to know how this is going. And you're treating it like it's a person, almost like AI, almost like think of it as your AI and you're asking it a question and it wants to spit out an answer for you. So that's how I would first go about it. But once you guys get deeper into Act 3, which is the Pica protocol, that's where you're really going to start engaging with the data itself and really getting into, like, you're going to know how to look for the data based on the kinds of questions that we ask in there. And then as you are going through the methodology, you might go back to the data and look for more information and clarify some stuff to make sure that you're not telling, like a one-sided picture of what's really happening of a deeper story. Does that make sense?
It does. That last part you said about telling a one-sided story with the data is really interesting to me. How do you address biases that come up in the data sometimes, or maybe the story that you tell with the data? I'm sure that if you're presenting the data, the story in front of executives, they may have a certain outcome that they expect from the story or a certain outcome that they want to take action from later. So how do you deal with biases? How do you deliver news that maybe your executives you're presenting to weren't prepared for?
Oh, I know, the bad news bears question. So I think I mentioned this in the chapter around the through line, which you must have gotten through at this point, which is kind of like that focus theme for the entire presentation. If you haven't gotten to the presenting by boxes framework, which is the framework that ties your entire presentation together, in that chapter, I talk about handling objections that are based in bias. I actually go pretty deep into confirmation bias into that chapter. It runs rampant. No one wants to hear their baby is ugly. And the thing is, with the through line, if you're using the through line in conjunction with some of the objection handling that I give later, that through line can take what sounds like bad news or negative story into, we found it, you're welcome, we found it, and we found a number of ways that we believe we can solve for it. So you are, instead of presenting the information that paints you as a villain, you are the hero for finding the villain in the data and then rescuing them with the solution, right? So that's one way to spin that. But when you get to people's objections, it's important to remember that they are human beings and they think emotionally, right? That's kind of what Ryan is also trying to say by that. That is what's coming up, is that they're leading with their emotions and they wanted the data to, what's the phrasing Ryan used? And we use emotions to make the decisions, and now I'm forgetting the quote.
You want to
logic to justify it, I think is what it is.
Justify. So the word I'm looking for is substantiate. So they were looking for your data to substantiate the outcome they wanted emotionally, right? So when the outcome doesn't match their biased desires, there are strategic ways. That's why this book has a lot of stuff about verbal communication, because there are verbal strategies that you can take to master the psychology of bias a little bit. So one of them, I think, is talking about setting up that you know this is going to conflict with their bias, or you know this is going to feel uncomfortable for them. So you can actually preface that, get in front of it and say, okay, now, want to let you know, this is what the data says, right? We're coming to you. This is exactly what we're presented with. And so here it is. You kind of present it. It's not your fault. You didn't make it that way. That's one thing we kind of have to let go of. And it is what it is. That's the truth of the data. It is what it is. If you've vetted the numbers, if you've double checked them, it is what it is. And you can say, now I realize that this might not have been the story you were looking for or the happy ending. Or we realize that this is going to lead us to a potential decision that we didn't ultimately want. But this is what we're suggesting based on the data to have an unbiased, course of action. And if this doesn't work, we have a backup plan. We can always go back. Like, you are addressing the emotional components of their objection and their bias by strategically naming that, there's a bias. Like, it's a commonly held belief that X, Y, Z. And yet our data is saying otherwise in this particular case. You're not absorbing any kind of blame for it. You're simply setting them up to create a twist that the data is conflicting with a previously held belief. And there's nothing wrong with that.
One thing to also keep in mind is this isn't necessarily like a one-off. It's not necessarily a one-off situation. So you can tell them, like, hey, here's exactly what the data says. And if it costs them money, they're just like, nah.
It's not me, it's the data.
Yeah. Well, they don't care, but they're not going to spend money either because it's not time in the fiscal year or whatnot. And so if it is important, because like a tire manufacturer here, their data science team predicted that they needed 500 more employees during a specific holiday season than what their people knew in their gut.
Right.
And so there's a real war right now between the old school way of thinking and then the data-driven way of thinking, and then those clash sometimes. And in that case, the executives won, but then 6 months later they were crying uncle because they had lost a ton of money in a very short period of time.
Yeah.
And if you could only tell better stories and get them on your side, you know, and that's the whole point of this. Allie, thank you so much. Incredible questions. Let's give her a round of applause.
Yeah, I hope that helped.
All right, as Max and Avery, I'm going to ask you both to come up here at the same time. You mentioned the Pica method. I know that's, I don't know where you got that acronym from.
I know.
But purpose, insight, context, and aesthetics.
Nice.
And I really like, first of all, I love the phrase, I think it was for insight, when you say storified the data. I thought that was well, and you know, talking about the purpose and really narrowing it down to a question. We're going to probably spend an entire class on that, so I know that's not something that we can get to. All right, we've got two that have come up here because they had kind of the same question. Max and Avery. First of all, I'm gonna actually ask them a couple questions. So now you can't get into your whole life story, Max, because you've got an incredible story, and we would need another hour for that. But where are you from, and all that kind of stuff?
I'm originally from Austin, Texas. I came to Nashville about 5 years ago, and here we are.
All right. And what about you, Avery?
I'm from Central Illinois, a couple hours south of Chicago, so I always tell people it's nothing like Chicago. It's just a small little farm town in Illinois.
And the reason I ask them those questions is because you all had questions about how to use data in your daily lives. So they were going a little off script and like, you know, we just want to know how we can use data better. And so I'll let them ask. Avery, why don't you go first?
Yeah, sure. My questions are very vague and very broad, so take them in whatever direction you want to. But for me, I feel like data helps me be aware of where I'm at right now, and then helps me stay accountable for where I want to go. So, what are some things that you keep track of in your daily life, maybe with data, quantitative or qualitative, that maybe keeps you accountable, helps you stay in a routine, things along that nature. So how does it help you just overall?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm kind of a health nut and biohacker. So the very first thing I do in the morning is I check my quality of sleep.
Me too. Everything. Yeah.
What do you use to track your sleep?
I'm gonna see you have one.
I have the Oura ring.
Okay.
Which
nice.
I love. And I love how Oura is really starting to innovate and starting to, like, one of the places I'd love to see Oura go is I've learned a lot about the nervous system in terms of managing nerves for public speaking and everything. And like I said, I'm sort of a health nut. So one of the things, like one thing I love about Oura is it tracks how much of a couch potato I'm being. And it'll pop up on the phone and go, hey, maybe it's time to stretch your legs, you big blob. I mean, it doesn't call me a big blob, but that's what I hear. So, you know, I love that. Like, it's keeping an eye on me a little bit, or it detected a workout, which I think is so cool, and the kind of workout. It's also starting to measure stress. So it will say, like, I'd love to see a notification where it would be like, hey, looking like some unusual stress right now. Could you take a breather, or would you like to do a 5-minute meditation? That's where I think we're going to get into like next level biometric tracking, where it's really going to interface and help with the quality and well-being of your daily life. And then the other major area I would say is just with money. You know, like I track my budget really carefully. I make a game out of it. I make a ritual out of it. And I like to make sure I know, like, ooh, what's my spend rate? Am I spending higher than, you know, what I've budgeted this month? Where do I need to pull back? So that's just another way I've enjoyed kind of like keeping a pulse on things for data in life.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, I feel like I do a lot of a lot of the same things, just because it's so helpful. You know, I feel like sometimes you can start to drift in whatever area of life, whether it's fitness or your budgeting, anything like that. So without the data, you know, it's very hard to stay on track.
Yeah.
Do you journal?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm a very spiritual person too, so I like to journal that way. And so I do. That was another point I wanted to talk about, was qualitative versus quantitative data. You know, a lot of people are like, they think of data and they're like, oh, it's just numbers, right? I'm a finance major, by the way, Leah.
Oh, cool.
So I feel like that's kind of the rap that finance people get, right? They're just data people, or like obviously data analytics guys,
Terrible
right?
thing, yes.
Right? But it's very qualitative too, you know, and so that's areas of my life that I like to keep track of with qualitative data, just so I can progress that way, you know.
So, do you journal digitally, or is it by writing?
A little bit of both. So sometimes I like taking notes on my phone, just because it's kind of easier, you know. Yeah. But other times I do like a pen and paper, just because I feel like it generates more thought.
I like it that way too. But Charlie and I have talked before about if you were to journal like for 10 years digitally, you could now upload that to an LLM and find out things about you when you were stressed out a lot, or it's so qualitative is actually the term we've kind of turned on its head ever since AI has really come to the forefront.
Well, but you can seriously correlate emotional states with behaviors in a much better way with that type of data too. So so anything that's impacting you. So you're talking about it, like if you're having trouble spiritually or whatever,
right?
There could be some sort of catalyst involved that you just don't pay attention to, and then you can actually pull that out of the data. So because you can just ask it, like on these 3 dates, like what's the common
what's the common denominator? Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. I used images as my journaling. I put images into my app all the time, and I'm not, and I can go back now, I think 12 years of images in day one, and see my kids that when they were 10 years old, now they're buying houses and stuff like that. So
you don't have to brag.
No, I don't know if that's bragging because it's in Memphis, but that's all right.
Dang.
Hey, give them the Memphis thing.
That's all right with you.
Yes.
This must be
Max,
Tennessee
go
humor.
ahead.
Well, first off, again, thank you so much for meeting with us here tonight. It was a real pleasure. But my main thing, so I have to use data a lot in my daily life, and I've been running into a problem which I really hoped that you'd be able to help me solve. See, I've learned a lot through this class and through the book about the importance of data storytelling, of course, and how we can actually apply it to our daily lives, especially, and every day, everything from those little interactions you have every day with people to the big boardroom meetings, right? But the problem that I've always been struggling with, at least more recently now than ever, is altering my vocabulary so that I can actually reach the audience I'm supposed to be reaching. You see, I have been able to do okay when I know the audience going into the actual I won't say altercation, meeting, but I a little bit of background. I do a little bit of agency work with musicians, and that's very literally being a business person, translating yourself to the vocabulary of a musician. And that can be very hard, especially when you have a diverse group of people. I mean, hell, there have been so many different rooms that I've had to speak to that are comprised of business people, creatives, people that have, where English isn't even their first language, right? And you have to really tailor yourself to that. And when you're in a situation where you don't exactly know the full scope of the audience going in, but you have this whole meeting and everything presented with a data story to tell, how exactly do you frame your vocabulary so it reaches that audience?
Great question.
Wow. By the way, everyone sounds like a radio star that has spoken to me.
This is Nashville.
I don't know what's going on, but
that's right.
True.
I'm very impressed.
I have never had a class where they're so engaged. They love
so articulate.
Very, very. I don't know. I've had a ball so far. So go ahead. I don't want.
No, all I was gonna add was I told you this is the best way I think we learn as a class, is just having these discussions.
Absolutely.
Like this.
Yeah.
And, that happens to me in every class that I teach. I came into. I'm supposed to be teaching analytics, and all we're doing is having conversations. And I don't know if they're learning anything, but I'm learning a ton. But I think that's a great question.
Because, I mean, even in your scenario, you had to feel us out at first.
Absolutely.
Like, think about it. You had to alter your vocabulary and I can even tell from day one till right now. I mean, just the rapport alone is different. It's more relaxed. There was a mold that had to be broken through. And when you're meeting a group of people for the very first time, where you have absolutely no idea who they are and what they're like, breaking that mold, what is the most effective way to do that?
That's a great question.
Just use all the industry terms.
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
So what I would do is recon in advance. I would not let the first time you learn about this audience to be the first time you interface with them directly in a presentation setting. So do you have people on the inside track, or do you know people on teams that can make introductions so that you could sit down with them in advance and say, hey, I'm going to be talking to this group for the first time. I'm super nervous because I'm not familiar with their vocab yet. Can you give me like a glossary? Like, what kinds of terms are tossed around a lot? What are sort of the acronyms or the buzzwords? Do they talk about synergies and out of the box and all that stuff? Or, you know, what kinds of lingo is going to help me sound like I'm in the know so I can be more aware? And then, so you do some recon and you do the best you can with that, but then you really just allow the mystery to unfold when you are there with them. You listen as they speak and you ask, could someone break that? That's a new term. Could someone break that down for me? You know, enjoy the process. Sometimes I think we take on the energy of like, oh, we should have known that. Oh, I'm scared. I don't fit in here. Instead of embracing the actual fun of getting to know the new vocabulary and showing how earnestly you want to learn how to speak in a way they recognize. Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Embrace
what I should send you guys after. What I'll send you guys after is this reminds me of a series of videos called the Gen Z Breakup, where it's these two actors that are breaking up, but in complete Gen Z language. So when I'm starting to coach people in that generation, and I had to have my 11-year-old son sit down with me and pause every 5 seconds to decode what the hell they just said in like bet and on God and catch these hands and whatever else. And it was hilariously funny, but I had to have him sit down. I'm like, you have to tell me what all these means because my clients are saying these things and I don't have a clue what that means. Am I just old? Which, yes, I am. But we made it fun and we made it a process and he knew every single term. And I sort of 30% understand now what they were saying.
Hey, and if you can't embrace that ambiguity going in, it's always going to be there. And you're right. Like, I mean, Leah, you were doing recon for this, right? You're like, okay, What is the level? How should I talk? I'm like, and I just kept saying, oh, just be yourself. Just be yourself. Just be yourself. And you're like, okay, that's not enough. But I think you've nailed it for today. And go ahead, Charlie. I know you had a question.
I've always got stuff to say.
Yeah, I know.
So I have to deal with this a lot in my industry because I deal with mobility, and nobody doesn't know anything about the backside of mobility. And so I misstep a lot of times and say, use industry terms or whatever. But like I've said the things enough to know like what is in my industry and what's not. And so every time I give them a piece of information that's got that in there, I'm like, now explain it back to me, or you understand what I'm saying about like what exactly that is. And I always usually get some sort of confirmation back from them that they do, because if they're just like yeah, and then you can't go off.
I got to say that actually is a really good follow-up into another question I had, and mainly if you guys have the time.
We'll let this one be the last, and then Leah, I'm not going to let you go without knowing what you're up to these days and what's up next as well.
This is just real quick, but mainly it is about that follow-up. So let's say you have just told the absolute best data story possible. It resonated with literally everyone there except for one person. What is the best way you would go about following up with them to reinstate what you just saw? Because you're probably not going to send them the PowerPoint you just showed, right? Because it didn't really work the first time, right? How would you want to go about reframing that just to really hit this one individual? At least on the back end.
One of the later chapters, I think in Act 4, is how to send a document version of what you presented that is a perfect, concrete, self-driven reminder and refresher of what you presented. And I give my whole step-by-step process for taking a live presentation, which you're now, especially when you guys get into the slide design, you're going to see that things are going to be way simpler than you might be used to, not a million things packed onto one slide. But that's not going to necessarily translate well to an offline handout that people, or record that people want of that. So it's about creating two different documents, but one is really geared to how to engage people in a visual and verbal capacity at the same time. And then how do you condense all of that information into something readable in a self-driven journey?
Thank you.
That is a great, I actually was saying that to my class last night. I'm going to force everybody to do a one-pager with every presentation. You know, first of all, it forces you down to getting things onto one page so that at least you've got something for yourself. But I notice I'm doing that more because when they ask questions, they're not going to remember everything I'm saying. But if I can put that now on a one-pager or 2 pages afterwards, you know, because all I'm looking to do is get the next conversation. And then I know that that's when action happens. And getting to that point, anything that you can do, the leave behind is very powerful. And then act like they were, when you talk to them, that they were incredibly enthused. Say, thank you so much for being there. I was so happy, you know, whatever. But great questions. Let's give, and you guys can stay up here because we're going to be wrapping up, but let's give Avery and Max a big hand. Great job. And Leah, thank you for your time. Actually, I've even got friends there that came here, and we're going to do a little bit more interviewing and networking with them. So we'll have some live stuff, and so I'm putting them through the ringer tonight. But I know that, first of all, you're not just an author. You do so much more than that. So tell us a little bit of what you're up to now. And I think you might even be going and doing some new stuff, I heard, through one of our conversations in the past. And you're going to be like, what's he talking about? But I'll get to that. But you go ahead. What are you up to these days?
Well, for this main business, so I actually kind of run 2 businesses side by side, but for this main business, my next big thing is I'm going to be creating kind of a really condensed online course. I already have a master online course companion to this book, but I'll be creating a really condensed course with a company in the hopes of getting it on LinkedIn Learning, which is super, super cool. I've been wanting to get material on there for a while. Trying to get the book out into more hands. And this is the year where I'm going to be talking more about how AI can be used to help enhance and facilitate the presentation process, but not replace, you or any core elements of, what I teach in the book. So it's a new frontier, and I'm excited because oh man, I tried to go into ChatGPT and ask it to create a beautiful, simple presentation slide describing something, and it just went completely awry. So I was like, okay, my job is secure. I'm not going anywhere.
Humans still need to be in the loop, right?
Yes, exactly.
That's right. And I think I was referring to your separate business, and you don't have to, I don't know if that's in stealth mode or anything, but
it's kind of, but I'm also a relationship coach, and they have a lot of overlap. So one of the ways I'm trying to kind of cross is I'm seeking to see how I can expand into more interpersonal dynamics at work, communication dynamics, conflict resolution. I'm interested in kind of branching out into that because I'm all about improving the well-being of people, and because people affect our well-being so much, our interactions affect that so much, that I'm seeking to sort of get a little less technical and more into the softer interpersonal things about how do we create excellent work, school, home environments where we all thrive.
Great. And so where would, for students and everybody else, what's the best way to see what you're up to? Your website is just your name, correct?
Yep, leapica.com.
Leah, and that's LEAPICA.com. I think I got that right. And what about the socials? Any of those that you are active on?
The main one I'm active on is just LinkedIn, same, Lea Pica.
Gotcha.
X is, I don't know what's going on there, so.
We don't either.
Back to way.
Yeah, I saw your comment. Charlie had a comment about threads. He goes, I think I'm just saying.
It's like yelling down a hallway.
Yelling down an empty hallway.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that was good. Charlie, anything else?
No, it's been very informative.
Yeah, thank you so much. Did we convince you to fly here and do a class live? I don't know. Come on, can we see if we can get that going here? Well, I'm no
That'd
pressure.
be amazing.
If I wish I had funding to make you come here, maybe I can find that.
Networking event will make her want to come.
Well, last year I couldn't make the Nashville Analytics Summit because I had to leave for Budapest the day that I would have been able to present. I know I sound so fancy. Like almost never happens. But, if I get invited back this year and I'm free.
Zach and I actually were talking this weekend, and we have an idea for a track of superstars as part of the analytics data storytelling. And we've already, you will be getting a call here soon. So I know you're coming to Nashville. I think it's October this year. So we hope to get you here for that, for sure.
All right.
All right.
Well,
thanks again, Leah, for your time.
Thank you, everyone. Good luck. I hope to hear how you all are doing. Wish you all the best.
Thank you for your time. This was an absolute pleasure. Can't thank you enough. I'm glad we waited till now to do this so that we could record it.
Me too.
And he every time I start the ending part, I'm just going to keep going for a second here because Charlie always interrupts me and is in the background being silly. I'm saying goodbye to somebody here, and thank you again. And I might reach out to you just to make sure I have all of your contact, website, all that stuff. And other than that, have a wonderful night.
Perfect. All right. Good night, everybody. Leaving on a high note. See ya.
There you go. Take care.